Hello and welcome back to Sonya Maya Psychology, a channel where myself, a psychologist, sex therapist, and clinician, talks about sex, relationships, psychology, hormones, all that fun stuff. So if you like that kind of content, finger that like and subscribe button and turn on bell notifications because it really helps. And watching to the end, of course. So today I'm going to be responding to a fan pal request. You can submit topic requests via my fan pal. The link is right here and it's also below in the description. This fan pal was asking about a situation where with his wife, who he's been with for a long time, he wants to bring up the fantasy of bringing another person into their dynamic, such as a threesome, or I think he may have mentioned bringing another man because he wants to watch his wife with another man. She has expressed some interest in this. She has also expressed a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of embarrassment. So, today I want to talk about how to bring up the idea of a fantasy such as threesomes or maybe hot wifing, similar type of vibe. With hot wifing, typically the man will be watching his partner with another man. But I want to talk about generally, right? How to bring up threesomes with your partner and how to go about threesomes in a way that it's not going to destruct the foundation of the relationship. And just as a disclaimer, I'm not going to be specifically addressing this person's situation. I'm going to be answering it more so as a general topic because I'm not able to give one-on-one advice, psychological or sexological, to people that are not my clients. So this is more of a general topic to address that topic request. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they think about having a threesome or bringing other people into the dynamic is not focusing on the why or focusing on each person's desire, because one person having the desire is not enough. Okay, you need to really have a transparent conversation about desires on both ends, because an ambivalent, oh, I don't know, is definitely not consent when it comes to bringing someone else into the relationship. Also, having a desire and a fantasy, like let's say you fantasize about your partner being with someone else, it doesn't mean that you want to act on it. So it's important to be very honest with yourself. It's also important to acknowledge that even if you think you want to act on it, you're not sure how you're going to feel until you're in that situation. And we're going to get into all that in terms of like jealousy and whatnot very soon in the video. But you want to make sure that you understand that just because someone has a fantasy, it doesn't mean that they want to act on it. And there are ways to play out your fantasies and talk about your fantasies with your partner without getting into this danger zone where one person or both people are not comfortable with what's happening. So if one person is more excited than the other, there is a bit of an imbalance, but that doesn't mean that the conversation shouldn't happen. It's just important that you handle it with a lot of care and intention. First off, I want to talk about some threesome stats, okay? Because you may or may not know this. If you watch my videos, you probably know this. But threesomes, group sex in the form of threesomes, happens to be the most common fantasy that is reported when people do studies and research and surveys and whatnot. And that stands true still in 2026. So Justin Lehmiller actually surveyed about 4,000 people for his book, Tell Me What You Want. And he was asking a lot of questions about people's preferences for group sex, threesomes, and getting more of an idea about sexual fantasies. And he found some pretty interesting stuff. So he found that heterosexual women were the least likely to share their sexual fantasies with their partner. Only 52% actually talked about it with their partner. Non-heterosexual women, so queer women, bi, etc., they were more likely at around 65%, which is more similar to the heterosexual dynamic and stats. For men, it wasn't that different, heterosexual or not. But yeah, queer women were more likely to talk about wanting a threesome or fantasy. And again, straight women are the least likely to act on this in terms of actually participating in a threesome. Only about 8% of heterosexual women had actually acted on this fantasy versus 15% of heterosexual men. So interestingly, women, regardless of sexual orientation, generally reported positive experiences associated with sharing that they wanted a threesome with their partner, whereas men were less likely to report that they had a positive reaction or positive experience when expressing that they wanted a threesome with their partner. And when you look at actual people, actual partners who did go ahead and have a threesome, men tend to report having a more positive experience than women. But that tells us something very important. And I think that's why it's really important that I'm making this video, because I believe that a lot from like hearing my client experiences and doing a lot of research, that because people tend to skip a lot of the important communication aspects of a threesome, I believe that that relates to the outcome of women or just people in general not necessarily feeling as comfortable after the fact. Another interesting piece of information is, according to Lehmiller's research, women tend to be more open to MMF, so male female dynamics, whereas men tend to be more open to female male dynamics. Of course, this is different if you're looking at like heterosexual versus queer, but in terms of heterosexual dynamics, that makes sense, right? So like if a woman's not attracted to women, it's likely that maybe she would even like watching like, woman on woman porn. But in terms of like actually participating in it, it might feel more performative, if you're not actually attracted to the same sex, so that definitely ends up being a barrier. Whereas for men, being attracted to both women, it's likely that they're going to be more comfortable with that idea or fantasize about it more often, especially if they watch a lot of porn growing up. There's a lot of those scenarios. Another point to keep in mind is a lot of people report that they like to be the center of attention in a threesome, which isn't always realistic depending on the dynamic. And that's something that can create tension, especially if one partner feels like they're being watched or evaluated or having to perform, or maybe they said yes, but they weren't actually sure how they would feel, and then in the moment they weren't as comfortable. So we'll get into that, how to prepare for that and navigate that more effectively. Yes, you can be comfortable watching your partner with somebody else, or you can like that in theory, but you don't know how it's actually going to feel, once you're actually in that situation. There is a term called compersion. So it's this idea that you have joy or warmth or really like euphoric experience watching someone you care about experience joy. And we're going to get into that soon too, because it's interesting actually to consider how you can actually have compersion, but then also have jealousy at the same time, even though they somewhat conflict. They feel conflictual, but they can both be true. So we'll get into that a little bit more later when we talk about jealousy, but something to keep in mind. So before deciding if you actually want to act on this threesome, it's important to have a very transparent conversation about why you're having a threesome, okay? Is it for novelty? It's important to acknowledge with your partner where your values are and how much they align. So if you are both individuals that rank highly with novelty, meaning like new experiences, that might be why. Is it novelty, eroticism, validation? Does something feel like it's missing in the relationship? It's really important to have a very transparent conversation about why you're going into it on both ends, okay? Because if it happens to come about that somebody is agreeing to it because of a fear of abandonment or something, like if they don't have the same fantasy or whatever, you really need to talk about that. It's important to put that on the table. It can actually make you closer. And vulnerability is really what nourishes relationships. Doesn't make it easy. Like I've kind of mentioned before, it's okay if each partner isn't equally excited, but it's very important to keep in mind that any type of ambiguous feelings or, or pressure, that's a no-go. You want to make sure to keep in mind that if there's an absolute no or more of an ambivalence and you're like trying to do it to appease somebody, be really honest with yourself about that, because it might not be the best idea. So again, a hesitant yes or ambivalence is not consent. Silence is not consent. In the fan pal scenario that I was addressing earlier, that inspired me to make this video, embarrassment and curiosity, that deserves safety and more deliberate, intentional discussion about where that's coming from. Maybe somebody is curious and like maybe does have that fantasy, but they're like, ooh, I don't know how I would feel being watched, like a lot of people don't know how they would feel actually having somebody watch them play with somebody else or their partner. So that's something to keep in mind, right? There might be like a body image issue, or you just, a lack of experience. Like I said, you don't know how you're going to feel until you're in the situation. So it's completely valid, but it's important to talk about very transparently before jumping right in. How to bring it up safely. So one communication framework I like to explain to my clients is this template of, it would make me feel safe if blank. Okay. So you want to come up with what would actually make you feel safe, some guidelines there. So like, for example, if we were to act on this fantasy, I would feel safe if we were in the same room at all times when there's play happening. So like if I get up and go to the bathroom, or if I get really intoxicated and then I can't play, I'm not comfortable with you playing with that person without me there, because that could unfortunately come up if it's not discussed, and then you don't know if it's okay in the moment, especially if there's like alcohol or drugs or whatever involved. So that's important. Or I would feel safe if we didn't repeat with the same person, or I would feel safe if no matter what, stop immediately without having to explain. We're going to get into like code words later, but yeah, like red light is a good one. So no matter what, we're in the scene, we're playing, red light means we're done. So having that established. And It's important to acknowledge that this isn't a one-time conversation. This will be ongoing because, like I've said before, you don't know how you're going to feel until you're in the situation, right? So you might find after having a first experience that you want to have another renegotiation of boundaries and red lines and just in general negotiate what you're comfortable with based on past experiences. So it's an ongoing conversation, and needs and boundaries tend to evolve, especially when somebody else enters the picture and emotions that you haven't experienced before enter the picture. When it comes to finding somebody to play with and setting context and environment, it is important to keep in mind that there are certain places where it might be a little bit easier or a little bit safer to find play partners. There's apps like Fields where a lot of people look for play partners, and there's more openness there in terms of like sexual explorations and whatnot. There's also play parties, and there's kink events like munches. From my understanding, munches are kink events where you can go out in public and there isn't play. And of course, there's kink parties too, but that would be a good opportunity to kind of dip your toes in, per se. When it comes to play parties, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of them are different in terms of how they set things up. I would recommend strongly, if you're going to go to a play party, finding one that really vets people. For example, there's a vetting process where you have to like answer a questionnaire about consent and whatnot, so that there's more of a thorough and organized process rather than just like anyone could come. That tends to be a good way to go about it, and that they are very clear on consent and boundaries. That's something to keep in mind too. Let's say you're swiping on Field or an app or something, and you end up finding somebody that seems to be a good fit for bringing them into your, into your dynamic. It's a very good idea to meet this person in person, 3D, like, actually in life before playing. And the reason I say this is because it gives you as the couple the opportunity to feel the vibe of that person before getting into the play experience where it's more vulnerable. It also gives you an opportunity to have another negotiation discussion or discuss any feelings that came up. Also, making sure you're attracted, all of those things. It gives you more opportunity to do that safely, especially if it's your first time bringing somebody in. So you can meet at a coffee shop, you could do dinner, that kind of thing. You can go on a date. And, it's important to keep in mind, like, you're dating, and also keep in mind that regardless of this person likes to use the term unicorn or whatever, because some people like that, some people don't. I used to use that term to describe myself when I used to unicorn in my days, and I didn't mind the term. But it's important to acknowledge that this is a human being with feelings, and there may be certain emotions that come up when you get intimate with somebody. So be prepared for that. And that's not a bad thing. It's just something to be mindful of and to navigate, because like, maybe that person thinks like, oh yeah, I'm cool with it just being sexual, but then things get a little bit more difficult. Maybe they start catch feelings for one or both of you or whatever. So just keep in mind that there's risks associated with this, but having that conversation and meeting that potential third really does give you more of an opportunity to create a comfortable space and negotiate how you're feeling before jumping into the bedroom. So before actually getting into the bedroom talk, it's important to do this yes, no, maybe, or you can frame it as green, yellow, red light with your partner. This means like, absolutely, I'm okay with watching this happen, right? So I'm okay with, as long as we're using protection, like any position is fine. Something like that. Yellow light might mean, I'm not sure if I would be comfortable with you expressing like affirmations and compliments to this partner in the moment, but like maybe we can talk about which compliments would feel comfortable and aligned. And if there's a point where it makes me uncomfortable, we'll make sure to talk about it later, because I'm not sure how I'll feel about you calling her beautiful or whatever, And then red light would be, absolutely, please do not do this. Like, do not take the condom off. This would be a pretty obvious one. Or, if I have to go to the bathroom, pause the play would be a red light type of thing. Like, this is absolute no. And you want to communicate that to the third as well, and it might feel unfamiliar to do so, but it is important to keep in mind, because what if that person doesn't know that it's not okay to kiss your partner? You're not comfortable with that, for them kissing your partner when you go to the bathroom or whatever. You just want to make sure to communicate the no's. I think that would be a really important one to talk about with that person, just so everyone's fair and on the same page. And of course, using red light as an in the moment code word to definitely let's stop when things are getting a bit too much for me. So in terms of aftercare and debrief, this is important as well. You want to take a moment to debrief, talk about what felt good, what felt hard, what you would or wouldn't want to happen again. So that's important to keep in mind. And it's also important to keep in mind that your partner might not want to do it again, and making sure to hold space for them without judgment and without pressure. Let's take a moment to talk about jealousy real quick. I think it's important to acknowledge that even though jealousy gets a bad rap, it's not a failure, it is an emotion. And it's completely fine to have jealousy. It's not having it that's a problem, quote unquote. It's how you navigate it, just like any negative emotion. And it's important not to put too much meaning on it in the sense that, like, this means that I can never do this again, right? Like, to come up with those conclusions, because when we're in a state of emotion mind, when we're triggered, whether it's jealousy, etc., we're not going to be in the best place to make logical decisions, because when we get triggered, our frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for logic and decision making, is not active in that moment. And yes, it will reactivate. The frontal lobe will be with us again very soon, but it's important to keep in mind that don't make any vast impulsive decisions in those moments, but it's not a bad thing. Typically, jealousy has to do with something internal, whether that is a fear of loss, rejection, abandonment. Maybe you're comparing yourself to the other person and you might not even be aware of it in the moment, but it could feel really, really heavy. And like I've said before, you might not know if you're going to be jealous until you're in the situation. So that's why flexibility, code words, and check-ins matter, as well as the debrief. Also, like I've said before, it's important to keep in mind that emotional attachment might happen to that third person, or that third person might end up having negative emotions associated with that dynamic, and just understanding that that's a possibility, okay? And working with it and navigating that. I just noticed that while talking about jealousy, I may have scratched here. Now it looks all red. Maybe it's because, unconsciously I'm like, ooh, jealousy, this is a hard topic. Oh, scratch myself. Yeah, that's weird. Anyways, back to the topic. One thing I want to say about jealousy is that it's so important to talk about with your partner, because even though people explain it as like this bad thing, it could actually be a great opportunity to strengthen the connection with your partner by being vulnerable and letting them know that it happened. You don't want to shove the jealousy down and not talk about it and ignore it, because that tends to make emotions stronger. You don't want to pretend that something isn't happening. You don't want it to get to a more vulnerable place by shoving and suppressing your feelings. So being honest about it, because it could actually help make things stronger. So nothing wrong with that. In closing, it is totally healthy to have fantasies with your partner, and it is very, very healthy to talk about these fantasies with your partner. Doesn't mean that both of you want to act on it. Maybe one of you does, one of you doesn't, and it's important to continue having conversations about what that looks like. These are all skills. It's important to keep that in mind. Navigating jealousy is a skill. Communicating boundaries and negotiation is a skill. Finding a partner at a party and getting more comfortable in play party spaces or kink spaces or even on the apps, all a skill. Doing those things more often builds the familiarity, which helps hone the skill in your brain, okay? But overall, if bringing in another person and doing it in the way that I've outlined in this video helps you build on eroticism and trust and connection, then that's amazing. If it happens to threaten stability, safety, then the relationship comes first. So that's important to keep in mind too. And I do hope that you learned something new in this video. I ask that you like and subscribe and turn on bell notifications for more videos like this. And thank you so much for watching until the end. You didn't have to do that, but it really does help my channel grow. Give feedback below. Let me know below if having a threesome is something that you have fantasized about, or if you have experienced one. Has it helped strengthen your relationship? Or were there some things that came up? I love talking about jealousy. I think it's important to talk about and to normalize, destigmatize, you know what I'm saying? If you have any topic requests, you can submit it on my fan pal. Link is right here. And everyone, again, please make pleasurable decisions and decisions, because you deserve it. You really, really do.